Hey, this is Johnny Vatos from Oingo Boingo former members.
It's a dead man's party. Who could ask for more?
Yep, we're still kicking it, and you're listening to the New Wave Music Podcast.
Welcome back to the New Wave Music Podcast. As always, this is Steve.
Hey, and this is T-Bone.
We'd like to welcome all our new listeners we've picked up over the last couple weeks. We really appreciate you guys listening. And if you're enjoying this podcast, tips are always appreciated as well. You can tip us at buymeacoffee.com/newwavemusic.
Yeah, we'd also like to give a shout out to our listeners in Ivins, Utah. We really appreciate you listening to us down there in southern Utah.
Well, hey, T-Bone, let's kick off this episode. I'm kind of excited for it. We kind of go back a little bit to a review format, but we also have an interview.
Yes, we do.
Well, let's kick it off. We're going to be focusing on the band The Dead Milkmen. You're going to probably recognize their hits, Instant Club Hit.
You'll dance to anything by Book of Love. You'll dance to anything by The Smiths. You'll dance to anything by Dave Patch Commode.
Punk Rock Girl.
One Saturday I took a walk to Zipperhead. I met a girl there and she almost knocked me dead. Punk rock girl, please look at me. What do you see? Let's travel around the world, just you and me, punk rock girl.
Or the song that probably put them on the map, Bitchin' Camaro.
Bitchin' Camaro, Bitchin' Camaro. I ran over my neighbors. Bitchin' Camaro, Bitchin' Camaro. Now I'm in all the papers. My folks bought me a Bitchin' Camaro with no insurance to match. So if I happen to run you down, please don't leave a scratch.
Yeah, so this album is called Quaker City Quiet Pills. It just came out this year, 2023. This is their first album since 2014's Pretty Music for Pretty People. And Steve, it's their overall 11th studio album. And so with the band, we have original members Rodney Linderman on vocals and keyboards. He goes by the name Rodney Anonymous. Joseph Gennaro on guitars, keyboards, and vocals. He goes by Joe Jack Talcum. Dean Sabatino on drums and vocals, and he goes by Dean Clean. And then their original bassist, he unfortunately died a number of years back. And so we have Dan Stevens on bass, and he's been with the band since 2004.
Nice. Well, T-Bone, when you recommended the Dead Milkmen, I got to admit, I thought they were not making any music again. Again, this is why we do the podcast. Sometimes we learn things along the way.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into this and see what we think. The opening track on the album is a great one. Grandpa's not a racist. He just voted for one.
They're coming for his Jesus. They're coming for his gun. Grandpa's not a racist. He just voted for one. Last night we found Grandpa wandering in the streets, whistling Dixie and wearing a white sheet, letting everybody know he won't be replaced by the Jews. And we say, oh, Grandpa, who could ever replace you?
Well, if you needed a reminder of the Dead Milkmen, this is a great track to start off the album. It's also a great track to jump back into the world of the Dead Milkmen. I love how this track started out with the chorus, then it hits you with that guitar riff that'll just pull you into the song. It features the staples that you've loved from the Milkmen, such as their vocals, their music stylings, and of course, their hilarious lyrics. This is definitely one that will be stuck in your head after listening to it for days.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this is one of my favorite songs on the album. Right out of the gate, a quick-paced punk song that doesn't hide their feelings about previous elections. This was the first single off of the album, and it's 2 minutes of exactly what we've come to expect from the Milkmen and an indicator of what's to come on this album.
Well, let's move on to the second track, Philadelphia Femdom.
Outside world, it might seem a bit extreme, but it's her scene and she knows what they need. Religious leaders might call it obscene when they're not getting whipped down on their knees, cause she's a femdom. Philadelphia femdom.
Here we get the first full punk song from the Milkmen on this album. Again, it features great lyrics and the music and vocals that you would expect from the Dead Milkmen. I found it to be a good song. Maybe not quite as solid as the opening track, but still overall I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel kind of the same about it. I do like it quite a bit, but this was the second single off the album, and clearly this title is a takeoff of Elton John's Philadelphia Freedom, but that's really where the comparison ends. And Steve, I really did like the yeah during the chorus.
Yeah,
It's kind of in the background. It's kind of a funny little sounding yeah, and I think it just works perfectly with this track. And that takes us up to the third song, Musical Chairs.
Where will you be when the music stops? What will you do when the needle drops?
So after two satirical songs, we get our first straight-out rock song of the album, but even this one has a little bit of a hidden message underneath. I particularly liked the poppy synths that hide under the rock guitars, and I like the line, "Let's all stand up for sitting down."
Yeah, T-Bone, I gotta admit, I enjoyed this song more than the last track, and I also thought that the alternating vocals worked very well. While I'm not going to say that this is an album highlight for me, it still worked very well, and actually a song I quite enjoyed.
Next up is the fourth track, The King of Sick.
But I'm the king of sick. Yeah, I'm the king of sick. Said I'm the king of sick. And if you're gonna make your move, you best make it quick. Now step off, I'm gonna be sick.
This one has really a great combination of guitars, bass, and drums with a fantastic clapping beat during the first chorus. Steve, that being said, this is probably the least interesting song on the album for me.
Yeah, T-Bone, for me, this is just one of those tracks that did not work. I felt the lyrics on this one lacked the quality that maybe the rest of the album has. I did enjoy the verse about the noisy neighbor, and it started to pull me in a little bit, but then after hearing The King of Sick over and over and over again in the chorus, my interest quickly left on this track.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Moving on to track number 5, Albert Square.
You live by yourself and refuse all help. You're the crankiest man on the block. Nobody cares about Albert Square. Nobody cares about Albert Square.
Moving on to Albert Square was an absolute highlight track for me on this album. I really enjoyed this song, and it had the chorus about nobody cares about Albert Square stuck in my ear for days. Also, this track uses the harpsichord, which I found to be outstanding. A bit later on, we had a chance to speak with Dean Clean, and I'm hoping maybe he can shed a little bit more light on why we should care about Albert Square.
Yeah, I'd really like to know a little bit more of who or what or anything about what Albert Square is. We do learn a little bit about him through the song, though. He's the type of person who tells people to get off his lawn, and he's the crankiest man on the block. This mid-tempo rocker is amusing, but I felt it was maybe a little bit too much on the nose. Fortunately, though, it's still a very entertaining song.
That brings up track number 6, Astral Dad.
Searching for souls who need a helping hand. Magic is just physics that we don't yet understand. Astral Dad. Astral projection dad.
Another album highlight for me that works so well. This is an outstanding Dead Milkmen ballad that features the musicianship, vocals, and lyrics you've come to expect from the Milkmen. The guitar solo about halfway into this track to me just added another layer into this song. Yes, I would definitely say to check this song out.
Yeah, the band keeps the pace a little bit slower on this track about a father who's a bit out there in his own mind, even to the point of creating great concern for his children. Actually, beyond just the lyrics of it, I actually found this to be one of the most accomplished songs musically on the album. Yeah. And it has a great piano line that I felt held this song together. It's a good song on this album. And that takes us up to the 7th track, We Have Always Lived in the Compound.
Trucks arrive, the cameras roll. We give a little tour of our home. From the workshop to the kitchen where we bake our bread, to the part of the yard where we bury our dead. We have always lived. We have always lived. We have always lived in the compound.
So, Steve, an unusual beat opens this track, and I really liked it. And there aren't too many songs that talk about living in a cult, but this one really works. The lyrics are outstanding, as is the musicianship, and the guitar work is particularly strong, including a bass line that gives it additional punch.
Maybe after the last 2 tracks that were a bit more softer sounding for the Dead Milkmen, this one definitely picks the pace back up. And it's another one that I enjoyed. The musicianship and the vocals are tight on this one. And I would definitely also recommend this one. Like you said, it's rare hearing about a cult, but the Dead Milkmen make it work so well.
Yes, they do. Up next is the 8th track, We Are Clearly Not the Master Race.
We're clearly not the master race. I said, the master race. A little bit slow, we can't keep up with the pace. We're clearly not the master race. I took out the garbage, so get off of my case.
Steve, this is one of my highlight tracks of this album. The Milkmen end a string of more traditional rock songs and get right back into their unique brand of social satire. There's some hilarious lines in this song, but it's the middle section, which is kind of similar in a way to the banter in Bitchin' Camaro, that takes this song to a new level. And I will never hear the line again without laughing, "Take the red pill, Mom." Late in the song, the pace jumps to a frenzy of punk guitars and drums. This song is both hilarious and really well put together.
Here is what I'd call maybe the staple sound of the Dead Milkmen that you're used to, like you said on this track. You get the tight vocals, the musicianship, and the satirical lyrics that you've come to expect from the Milkmen. And I'm just going to say that the lyrics are the highlight on this track.
Yeah, especially during that the spoken section, not the singing section.
Right.
But I mean, the rest of it is fantastic.
When they kind of go off on their tangent.
Exactly.
I dare you to listen to that and not crack a smile.
Oh, you can't. Absolutely.
Well, then, T-Bone, we're going to get to track number 9, which is probably my favorite song on the album. How Do You Even Manage to Exist?
This is not rocket science. It's not even bottle rocket science. When you order food, you get in line. You look at the menu. You decide what you want. When the person behind the counter says next, you step up and you give your order. You do not hold up the entire line by staring off into space for 10 minutes and then saying, "Oh, it all looks so delightful. How could I possibly ever make up my mind?"
I'm saying it now, this is my new favorite Dead Milkmen song of all time. The lyrics and the vocal delivery were on point, but what makes this song go from an average song to my favorite Dead Milkmen song of all time? Well, these 7 words, the great butt spoon of Hunan province. You heard me right. It's a hilarious story that's well worth listening to the song to find out about.
Yeah, Steve, this is kind of a spoken word track on how annoying hipsters are when they're ordering food in restaurants. The guitar work under Rodney's lyrics are immediately listenable and would work on their own, but it's hard not to laugh hysterically and almost overlook how good the instrumentation is on this song. And you are absolutely right. It is a gem of a song with some of the funniest spoken word lyrics I've heard maybe ever.
I haven't laughed this hard on a song since Suicidal Tendencies institutionalized.
Yeah, and then kind of in some ways it's very similar in that respect. So that takes us up to the 10th song, a song title that we really can't even mention without getting an explicit on this podcast.
I heard there was a secret song, can't even play all night long. A melody to turn you on, restore your faith and keep it strong. Yeah, God wrote.
Steve, I don't know what to say about this song. I don't even know where to start. The drumming is exceptional, and I really like the guitar work. As for the lyrics, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know if the band is talking about a real book, saying it was written by God, or if it's all something just totally made up. It's a decent song, not one of my favorites. It's very unusual.
Well, speaking of unusual, T-Bone, did my ears deceive me, or was that a bit of synth work that opened up this track? Again, I found it to be kind of an enjoyable song, not really knowing what it is. Like you said, it's kind of confusing, but the highlight, though, for me was the depth of the musicianship on this song. It sounded quite a bit different than what we've heard on this album, and that synth riff played throughout the song worked very well.
Yeah, I think that the musicianship on the song works far better than whatever they're talking about on the lyrics. I don't want to sound like I'm an idiot or anything like that, but obviously I'm missing something when it comes to what this song is about.
That brings us to track number 11, Hen's Tooth and Goofa Dust.
Bring me the knot from a hangman's noose, tail feathers of an old blind goose, toenails of Robert the Bruce. I need the knot from a hangman's noose because I got some joy.
I loved how this opens with that guitar riff, the percussions, and then goes into like a surf rock track. The musicianship again is front and center on this track. The lyrics are also worth a little bit of a listen as well.
Steve, we haven't said this in a while. Are you reading my notes? I think you might be. Yeah, this has outstanding bass and it's the focus of what really, you're right. It is kind of a surf punk rock song. Mm-hmm. To me, it sounds like they're talking about putting together some sort of concoction, maybe like a witch's brew or something. It's
the Dead Milkmen. I really don't want to analyze their lyrics because I'm not in the right state of mind to do that.
Right. In addition, it has some great guitar work and a really wonderful driving drum beat. So next up is the 12th track, Melt Into the Night.
They take my precious cargo, running from the lights. Wrapped up in a coat, they melt into the night.
So Steve, we've heard just about every music style on this album, and now we have a new one, a goth track with another great use of the bass. As a matter of fact, I almost felt as though I was listening to their version of a Cure song. It worked really well with me. This has to be unlike any song I'm familiar with from the Milkmen, and I think that's not only why it works well, but I really did enjoy it. This is the longest track on the album of pretty short songs, but it doesn't get tiring, and I felt that it works.
Yeah, I agree with you. The mix of the percussion and the synth and the guitars, I found it to be very enjoyable. And also that different vocal mix on this track, I found to be very effective. This one may not have the level of wit and sarcasm that the Milkmen are known for. However, I really enjoyed this track.
Yeah, I think it's a smart track, especially when you kind of look at the lyrics and everything, the musicianship. It's really smarter than you would actually expect it to be.
And the album ends with the track, The New York Guide to Art.
He tried to gouge out both his eyes, while screaming art is only for the blind. He caught sepsis, he almost died, but he did it all for art. Somebody shouted, my kid could do that. He shouted back, your kid is dumb and fat.
As we close out this album, I do like the last half of how this album kind of flows from one track to the next. Here, the final track on the album, we get some tighter vocals, along with some outstanding percussions and a driving bass track. I love this as a closing song, as it's going to leave you wanting more, not less, from the Milkmen.
And what better way to close out the album than a song about the pretentiousness of the New York art world? Not only is it a fun song, but one that, Steve, I completely agree with. And I love the line in there that says, he tried to gouge out both his eyes while screaming art is only for the blind. He caught sepsis, he almost died, but he did it all for art.
Well, T-Bone, I gotta admit, I was a mild fan of the Dead Milkmen. I knew the hits that we mentioned into the intro of this episode, but not much else. When you told me the Dead Milkmen had a new album coming out, I was lukewarm to it. After hearing the first single of the opening track, Grandpa's Not a Racist, it reminded me of what I've come to love from the Dead Milkmen. I found most of this album to be a great listening experience. I will say that I do understand that Dead Milkmen may not be for everyone, but I'd recommend this album still to anyone who likes any type of punk rock music, a little bit of satirical lyrics, and who is not easily offended.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Anyone who's slightly familiar with the Dead Milkmen know what they're in for when it comes to their particular brand of satirical punk rock. And you are completely right, Steve. It's bound to offend somebody. And to be honest, I don't really think they care if it does. What surprised me is to find that the humor, sometimes a bit sick, sometimes on the nose, it really had great musicianship to go along with it. I think it's easy to forget that these guys can really play. Now, we kind of mentioned the album is a quick listen. Most of the songs are about 2 minutes, maybe 3. They're very short. And I have to say, I was surprised how much I enjoyed this album. It's clearly, you said it, it's not going to appeal to everybody, but I do recommend it, especially to those that remember the band from their heyday.
And to round out this episode, T-Bone arranged to have us speak with Dean Clean from the Dead Milkmen, so we're going to have T-Bone take it away.
Now that we've reviewed the album, we're thrilled to have the drummer for the Dead Milkmen, Dean Clean, on the podcast. Dean, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. We're glad to have you here. So let's kind of jump back in time and get some of these questions out of the way. How did the Dead Milkmen get together?
Let's see. I joined in 83, but the origins of the band actually are before that. Joe in high school in the late 70s, early 80s, he graduated. Well, we both graduated in 1980. He had a creative writing class, and I think he created a fake band newsletter as a writing project, and he invented the character Jack Talcum and created the Dead Milkmen. So it was kind of like a story before the actual band existed. Although Joe was probably starting to play a little guitar, and I know he played piano back then. And he and his neighbor, a guy named Garth, would make these goofy cassette tapes of silly songs that they wrote, kind of to illustrate or support the writing that Joe did. And somehow Rodney got word of this at school. Now, Rodney's a year younger than we are, and he cornered Joe one day at school and said, "Hey, I heard those tapes. I think they're great. Next time you do one, I got to get involved." And so that was the extent of it for probably a year or two before I joined. And Joe eventually went to Temple University here in Philly, and he met Dave Blood through Dave's brother, who was going to the Temple University as well. And they ended up sharing an apartment in the Manayunk section of Philly. And coincidentally, one of my best friends from high school was also attending the same program as Joe. And my friend Dave got invited to their Christmas party. And this would be December of 1982. And so I went to this Christmas party, not really knowing anybody other than my friend Dave, who was their friend. And, everybody was nice and friendly. It was a fun party. And so I found out that they were making music, and I had just recently stopped playing music with a friend of mine. He decided to get out of the music biz. And so I was kind of looking around for I would like to join a band or play music with people. And so I said, well, if you need a drummer, let me know. And they said, yeah, we actually do need a drummer. So it was like a month or two later that we actually kind of got it together. And I went there, and the cool thing about it is that they already had a bunch of songs, because Joe and Dave had been working on songs for a while. And so the three of us would work up, I would work up drum parts and kind of, I became the drummer. I joined the band. I became Dean Clean. And it was just like a couple weeks later, or maybe a month or two later, that we got our first show. And that would be the summer of 1983. So that anniversary, I think it's in July. I think it's July 27th or 3rd. I can't. So it's coming up.
40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. The thing about the show is that up until then, I never met Rodney. We got to the show, or I got to the show with my drums, and we're loading in, and Joe and Dave showed up, and there's this other guy with them. And Joe says to me, "Hey, this is Rodney. He wrote lots of the words. He's going to sing tonight." And I was like, what? Because up until then, Joe had been singing everything. So I said, okay, whatever, and we played that first show. And, as they say, the rest is history. Rodney was great right out of the gate. So I can't complain. And it was a lot of fun. And from then on, we became the four-piece that we are. That was December of 1983.
It's funny because we have talked to, Steve, you and I have talked to numerous artists where it's been 40 years this year. We just recently talked to Ian McNabb of Icicle Works, and their first album was 40 years ago this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really quite amazing that so much music came about at relatively the same time.
That's cool. We're still kicking.
Yeah. Yes.
Who came up with the name, the Dead Milkmen?
Joe did for his writing project. I think it was already established that the band was called the Dead Milkmen. I did come up with the cow logo that you still see today. So
I love that logo.
It didn't exist until I joined the band. So
yeah, it's a great logo. Very memorable. So you mentioned your pseudonym. Each of you does have an interesting pseudonym. Your real name being Dean Sabatino. Right. How did you come up with Dean Clean?
Oh, it was kind of spur of the moment. I mean, they were like, "Oh, what's your name going to be?" And I just came up with Dean Clean because it rhymed, and
it rhymes.
It just seemed like, I don't know, something to do. Dave Blood and Joe Jack Talcum and Rodney Anonymous.
And Rodney's had a number of different names over the years.
Yeah, he's changed his name. I changed my name to Mallory for one album just to see if anybody would care. And it was so funny. Oh, Mallory's not as good drummer as Dean. Oh, Mallory's a better drummer than Dean. It was like, it was just kind of a goof and a joke.
Oh, that's great.
So Dean, can you tell us how you got into music and who were your influences?
Well, let's see. As a kid, I loved going to the parades in our nearby town. And I used to always really like, when the drum line walked by. I thought that was really cool. It wasn't until, I guess, 6th grade when I started taking lessons in school. and I didn't even play a real drum. They had us play on practice pads for a year. But so it was probably, watching the high school marching bands play in parades. And then, from then on, when I was in junior high, I started, I was in the school band and the school orchestra. And I took some private lessons for a while. Got my first drum kit in 1976. I was in seventh grade. And it's my cat. Sorry about that. 1976. I wasn't in a band then, but I had some friends who played music. I started high school and I met a guy who was a little bit older than I was, and he was a good musical influence on me. And he was teaching himself how to play guitar. And in fact, before I was into punk rock, I was really into prog rock. In fact, my very first concert here in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Spectrum, which doesn't exist as a concert hall anymore, or a venue, was Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Oh, right.
It was like in 1977.
Yeah.
So I was really into like prog rock, but my friend Mike and I were hanging out one night and we saw a TV show about this phenomenon in England called punk rock. And we were like, what is this stuff? And they had bands. I guess they talked about the Sex Pistols, but I seem to remember the band that was mostly featured and that mostly we liked was The Damned.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike and I was like, well, hey, this looks like fun stuff. We could do this. And so he and I started, goofing around, just trying to write some songs. Mike would write songs and sing and play guitar, and I would play drums. The thing about it is that we were called Narthex, and if you search on the internet, you can actually find. I think we're even on iTunes out there.
Oh.
We could never find a bass player because we were out in the suburbs north of Philly, and just at that time, people were not exposed to that kind of music or had that kind of interest in that kind of stuff. So we could never find a bass player, and so we just carried on as a duo. We actually got some gigs in Philly in the early 80s. We played a handful of times at some clubs in Philly, and we went over pretty well, but we were never successful in finding a bass player. But Mike was a good musical influence. He was, I don't know how he became exposed to it. Maybe listened to college radio, like the Princeton's radio station or FMU or whatever he could get up in the suburbs there. So, when Mike decided that he wanted to hang up his guitar, that's when I was set adrift, and that's when I was living in Philadelphia. I went to school in Philly and then got a job in Philly. I am a graphic designer by education and trade, so that's how the logo for the band came about. But so that's how I ended up in Philly, and that's how I ended up, meeting up with the Milkmen guys.
Well, let's change subjects just a touch here. For the band has always been, funny, clever, and at times timely. Of course, you can be all of those things if you want to, but what would you consider the Dead Milkmen to be, more of a satirical band or a punk band?
Well, I think we're a punk band who uses satire in our lyrics. The interesting thing is when we got started in Philly, there were people putting on punk rock shows. Hardcore punk was the thing back then, and Maximum Rock and Roll was the magazine and the thing that everybody looked at. And we had some friends who were putting on shows, and they would put us on show bills with these, straight up hardcore bands, and we're nothing like a hardcore band. But the thing is that, we seemed to win over the crowd, and people liked us and had a lot of fun listening to us. I remember when we made a demo tape, and we had the song Bitchin' Camaro on it, and we gave it to the University of Pennsylvania's radio station, WXPN. And, back then it was all student run, and, student DJs could play whatever they wanted. There were a lot of punk rock shows, and they started playing the cassette, and it was really popular. They would play it a bunch of times every week. And so when we got our first show in West Philly at one of these hardcore shows, and we started playing Bitchin' Camaro, we were just dumbstruck because everybody knew all the words already. It was like, wow, this is weird. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was exciting, but it was strange.
It's a classic.
So speaking of the song Bitch and Camaro, it is such a classic song, as T-Bone said. It displays the humor and the wit of the Dead Milkmen very well, especially the start of that song about the opening lines about the Doors having a good sense of humor and not suing. How much of the start of that song was improvised, or was that all written?
That was pretty much improvised. I mean, they would do a version of that story when we would play the song, but I think that was just either take one or take two in the recording studio. We didn't have a lot of time or money at the time. And, they just kind of like, you hear Rodney kind of urging Joe to come on, let's move along. We got the song to play here. But no, it was, and nowadays, I mean, we do that song still, and it just gives Rodney an opportunity to talk about anything. So
Yeah.
you never know what he's going to talk about. And oftentimes Dan, our bass player, and I will just be cracking up while we're trying to keep straight time back behind Rodney, because he just goes off on a tangent. He'll talk for like 5-10 minutes sometimes. So you never know what's going to happen.
Especially when you said Joe is the other person speaking in the first part there.
Yeah, it's Joe and Rodney.
Yeah, especially when Joe says the People's Court, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah,
And
right.
you kind of think that's got to be improvised.
Yeah, totally improvised. Yeah.
So the Dead Milkmen unfortunately did call it quits back in 1995. What led to the band hanging it up back then?
Well, yeah, basically it's me. I got really burned out. I mean, we had been driving around the country in a van for 10 years, and I was just exhausted. It just seemed like a good time to stop. We were having record company issues, and it was uncomfortable to tour. We hadn't kind of reached the next level, and I thought, well, this is probably a good time to stop. I mean, we didn't break up acrimoniously or anything. It was just like, well, this isn't fun anymore. At least for me, it was not fun anymore. And I said, I got to stop. It was, it was a very emotional decision, but I was like, I just can't do this right now. So, I was married. I wanted to have a family. And so we went our separate ways. I mean, we've all done music. We all did music projects after that. I even played with Joe in his group called Butterfly Joe. We released one album, and I played with some other people around Philly. Rodney had a project called Burn Witch Burn. Dave Blood actually ended up going back to grad school, and he spent some time in Europe studying and working. So we all kind of went our separate ways. But it was not. We weren't fighting or anything. It was just like, okay, it's I went to the band and said, I can't do this anymore for a while.
Well, at least it was on good terms.
Yeah. We're all still friends.
Well, and you just mentioned your bassist Dave Blood. Now, he died in 2004. Was the loss of him anything that brought the band back together?
Well, it was. I mean, we had a public. We had not a church service. We went to a Quaker meeting, and we had a lot of people show up, which was really nice. We wanted to do something for the fans, and they showed up, and it was good. People got up to say some nice things about Dave. And I don't know if you've ever been to a Quaker meeting at all, but basically, if the spirit moves you, you stand up and you can talk about anything. And so it was a nice get together for a lot of people who like the band and love Dave. But we decided to do 2 reunion shows at our favorite venue here in Philly at the time, the Trocadero. And that's when we recruited Dan to play bass. Dan was a big fan of the band, a big fan of Dave's bass playing. And so he knew a lot of the songs going in when we went into rehearsals. So that made it also, very easy to kind of get back into the swing of things. So we played those 2 shows. I guess it was in 2004, and we didn't think we'd do anything else after that. I mean, there was no talk of, well, let's start the band up again. We were all doing stuff, working, playing with other people. And, I had a young son and this, that, and the other. And it wasn't until, I think it was 2008, when we decided to start up again. And that's only because of the Fun Festival that was taking place in Austin. Now, the guy who ran the Fun Fest was named Graham, and he started badgering us at about 2 years before that. He was like, I run this festival, and I always love to have bands that haven't played together in years get back together for a special show. I would love for you guys to come down and play in Austin. And we kind of hemmed and hawed. He's like, no, we haven't. You can't do that. We just put them off for a while. He finally convinced us. I mean, he did. He said, okay, well, here's a chunk of money. You love Austin. You recorded 3 records here. You have lots of friends down here. Come on, it'll be a lot of fun, and you'll have a good time, and you'll make a little money in your pocket, and you'll go home happy. So he's like, okay, we'll do it. And so we played 2 warm-up shows in Philly in small clubs, and then we went down and we played this ginormous festival, which was mind-blowing. And and afterwards we had such a great time. And it's like everybody was like, well, this is kind of fun, maybe we should do this again. And the only stipulation was that we all agreed is that we weren't going to be like a nostalgia act, where we weren't going to just go out and play the same old songs over and over again. So that's why, we all insisted that we write new songs and release new material. So we've been going since 2008, sort of at a much lower intensity in terms of, being a band. We're not doing long tours. We might do like fly out weekends where we play 2 or 3 shows. And, over the past, 10 years, I think we've released, our 3rd album just came out, which you just talked about. And we did two before that, and a couple, an EP and some singles. So, we like to keep moving forward in that direction by writing new material and keeping going that way. So.
Well, let me ask you this then. So I saw you guys back in the day. I think you were on a bill with Mojo Nixon and somebody else, but it's not coming to mind. Maybe, Cave Dogs, exactly. And the response was great. Now, you speak about this festival that you went to. How was the response to you kind of coming back out as a band?
It's been great. I mean, we have a very loyal and diverse fan base. It's been great. We have some of our original fans from back in the day, and we have their kids now as fans. So it's been a lot of fun. I mean, when you go to a Dead Milkmen show now, you see all ages, and it's a lot of fun. It's been good. Excuse me.
When it comes to writing is there a primary songwriter for the band, or is it more of a collaborative effort between the group?
It's mostly a collaborative effort. We all share songwriting duties. We all use the modern technology, and we upload songs to file sharing, Dropbox or whatever. If we record a demo, you can see a little bit of my recording studio behind me, but we all have facilities at home to do some at least rudimentary demos for songs, and it's still a very collaborative effort. I mean, Rodney does write a lot of the lyrics, especially for the songs that he writes, and Joe writes lyrics for his songs. I've written some lyrics. I wrote lyrics for 2 songs on the new record, the Albert Square and the Melt into the Night.
Oh, nice. I
wrote some music for some of the other songs, but we always consider it very collaborative, because when we go into the rehearsal room, we're tweaking the arrangements, and we're tweaking parts in terms of what people play and that kind of thing. So, we share equally in the songwriting. So that's great. I think it's better that way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So you just mentioned it. Let's start talking about the new album. Brand new out. It's called Quaker City Quiet Pills. Now, Dean, what is a Quaker City Quiet Pill?
Well, we were struggling with trying to come up with a title for this record, and we were bantering via email back and forth about it. Rodney joked for a long time that the working title for this record was Punk's Not Dead, but Rush Limbaugh Still Is. But we didn't think that was a very good title for the record. At least, I mean, it made us laugh, but I don't think it had staying power.
Yeah.
Personally. But anyway, so we were bantering back and forth via email about what we should do. And at one point, I threw out the word just Philadelphia just to see what would happen. And then Rodney came back with Quaker City, which is, a kind of a nickname for Philadelphia. And then Rodney inserted Quiet Pills, which I hadn't heard of before. And now I'm not someone who's used Reddit over the years, but apparently about 10 years ago, there was a conspiracy / controversy on Reddit about Lake City Quiet Pills. I can't get into the super details of it. I mean, I did some research on it once we started talking about it, but Ronnie came up with the idea of Quaker City Quiet Pills. And I mean, Quiet Pills apparently is a nickname for bullets. So want, if you're a mob member and you want somebody to take a quiet pill, that'll shut them up.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's where the title comes from. And we all agreed that would work really well. So
it's all coming together now.
Well, the new album is filled with some outstanding Dead Milkmen songs such as Grandpa's Not a Racist, Astral Dad, and How Do You Even Manage to Exist, among others. Was there a particular track on the new album that stands out to you?
I like a lot of the songs. I think it's a good, strong record. I think it has, it harkens back to the early days of even Big Lizard, and it's got some newer stuff, which, keeps us going. I mean, I like a lot of it. I like Philadelphia Femdom. I like King of Sick. I like Astral Dad a lot. I think that's a great song Joe brought to the table. And We Are Clearly Not the Master Race. That's got another little interlude between Rodney and Joe, which was probably more scripted than Bitch and Camaro, but still, it's always a little different when we play it. So.
Well, I don't think I've laughed as hard as long and hard since I heard We Are Clearly Not the Master Race. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, many of your songs are very timely, and that one surely is. Did you guys simply watch the news lately to put that song together?
How could we not be influenced by the news over the last 8 years or 4 years or whatever?
Yeah.
5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Another track that I found myself really enjoying was the track Albert Square. But I got to ask, who is Albert Square, and what can you tell us about that song?
I can't tell you anything about that song. No, it's just about, I envisioned it sort of more like a Baroque song. There is some harpsichord in the break in the middle. I think maybe if I had a second go around, I might put some more harpsichord in it. Albert Square just refers to England or whatever, but I can't get into specifics about that song.
We'll leave it at that then. So one thing I like about this album is how you guys contrast the satirical songs with some straight out rock songs. Tell us how the album came together.
Laboriously. I mean, we struggled because of COVID, because of lockdown. I mean, literally, we in January of 2020, we had started writing a few songs in the fall of 2019, but 2020, usually in January, we have what we jokingly call the board meeting, where we go out to dinner and we have our managers there, and we kind of talk about, well, what are we going to do this year? Two of the things were, one, we're going to try and increase our YouTube viewership, because up until then we just had a couple of odds and ends videos on it, and we really weren't doing anything with it. And the second thing was, we're going to work on the songs for the new record. In fact, I think we decided, we're not going to play any shows. We're just going to put our heads down and we're going to work on all the songs for the new record. We're going to record it this year. And maybe it'll come out in the fall, but maybe it'll come out at the beginning of the next year. So we started rehearsals in February of 2020. And by mid-March, everything shut down. We couldn't get together. We couldn't go to the rehearsal studio. I guess the one saving thing is that we talked about YouTube, so we decided to do a weekly Zoom call. We do it usually on Thursday nights, and it was called Big Questions with the Dead Milkmen. I urge everyone listening to check it out on YouTube. And each week, someone takes a turn asking a quote unquote big question. Now it's veered wildly all over the place, but so we just talk about the question of the week, and then we have a segment at the end called recommendations. Everybody can recommend a book, a movie, a song, a band, anything that you come across. And we've been doing it ever since then. I mean, the idea was we started it up just before we couldn't rehearse anymore. We were going to do it while we were, because we weren't going to be touring, we were going to put these out that year while we were recording the record. But we've kept it up since. I mean, that whole year we couldn't do anything. It wasn't until, I guess, the summer of 2021 where we actually were able to get back in the rehearsal room and start playing these songs again. We had a session at the end of 2021, we recorded half the record. And then we, in 2022, we wrote some more songs. We did play, I think we played like half a dozen shows in 2022. And then we had a second session to record the rest of the songs last fall. And then we finally had all the songs, recorded, mixed, mastered, and ready to go. So it's been a long time coming, longer than we had wanted, but that's the way it worked out. There's nothing we could have done about it.
One thing to me that defies the Dead Milkmen is you're completely honest and unfiltered in your lyrics. I was thrilled that this album continues that tradition. When writing lyrics or finding a topic for a song, is everything on the table, or have there been some subjects that are off limits?
I can't think of anything in particular. I mean, there's a pile of demos that are unreleased that are just ridiculous. In fact, we talked about one that actually I think is pretty funny, that Rodney had worked on or came up with the concept for back when we did the King in Yellow record in 2013 or 14. It's a song called Baby Boom it would be like the theme song for a TV show called Baby Boom, where little babies were trained in bomb diffusing because their hands were so small they could get inside and disconnect the wires or whatever. I mean, the concept for the song sounds hilarious, and I don't know if we ever actually worked up a version of it. Rodney might have a demo floating around somewhere, but that didn't
maybe
end up on the record. But I mean,
maybe for the next one.
Yeah, who knows? It might make a comeback. But no, I mean, we throw a lot of stuff into the pile. Not all of it makes the cut. So we'll see what happens.
So, over the past couple of decades, Rodney has not always been doing the main vocal duty. I believe I read that you have done your share. Are there songs on this album that you're helming those songs?
No, there's
you don't do the singing.
Melt Into the Night was a song that came together very towards the end. I wrote the music for it, and then I wrote the words for it, but we were in the recording studio, and I came in with a set of lyrics for it. Nobody had really seen or read them before, and I didn't want to sing it, and nobody else wanted to sing it by themselves. So I came up with the concept of us all recording a vocal track. And then if you listen carefully, the people mixed all our voices together at various points in the song. It's kind of fades in, and everybody fades in and fades out throughout the song. I haven't sung a song by myself. I think the only one I ever did on a Milkman record was Crystalline, which was on Stoney's Extra Stout Pig.
It's usually Rodney and Joe.
Yeah, it's usually Rodney and Joe. I've certainly contributed some background vocals, and Dan and I did on this one as well. But it's usually those two guys that do the vocals. And, early in the 90s, when we did a couple albums for Hollywood Records, there was I guess it was not Richard, but Dick. There was a lot of songs that Joe sang, which was, people were kind of freaked out about that. So it's just the way it worked out.
Yep. Well, so you mentioned that you guys really aren't touring? I mean, you'll do shows here and there, weekend shows. Is that kind of the plan to with this new album coming out? You're not planning on actually hitting the road for it?
No, we don't have a long tour plan. We have a show coming up in a week and a half here in Philadelphia at the Laurel Hill Cemetery. We have played before. It's always a great time. The Laurel Hill Cemetery is an amazing place. I mean, back in Victorian times, people used to go on Sundays and have picnics and wander around. This has some of the most beautiful, like stone granite mausoleums around, and lots of the former Philadelphia wealthy families are buried there. But they have a very active events program there, and they have movies. In fact, Rodney even hosted one night a couple years ago. So they show horror movies, and they have bands play. Not every week, but we started playing there. I think we played there 3 or 4 times before. This will be our 4th or 5th time. I can't remember. And we always have a great time. We set up in front of this giant receiving vault, which is this big stone building with columns. And there's like kind of a natural amphitheater in front of us, just covered with gravestones. But people can come in, they can bring a picnic, a blanket, lawn chairs. It's an all ages event. It's fun. And, we're playing it on the 7th of July. In fact, it's nearly sold out, if not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Pretty big event.
Dean, people are just dying to see you there.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I figured.
We killed him. But yeah, we're playing that, and we have a couple shows in September. We're playing the Muddy Roots Festival in Tennessee, Labor Day weekend, and we have a show, I guess the day after that or night before, up in the Detroit area. Right now, those are the only shows we have on the books. I expect we'll probably be doing hopefully a lot more next spring after the winter. So, but yeah, we did like a 10-show tour down the West Coast maybe 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And, that's the longest stretch that we've really done. We usually fly out, maybe play 2 or 3 shows and come home. And so maybe we'll play a dozen or 15 shows a year. And that's about all we can handle, really. So
a lot of artists just live to be on the stage. Is that for how you guys feel, or? Well,
I mean, I like playing the shows. When you're on tour, it's a lot of waiting around. And the best part of the day is that, hour, 2 hours that you're on stage. So with the type of touring we're doing now, we're like catching flights and hopping between cities. There's not a lot of time to sightsee, although, you occasionally get to see some friends that you haven't seen in a long time. But it's not for everybody, but it's fun. When we can do it, it's a lot of fun.
Well, Dean, we can't thank you enough for joining us on the New Wave Music Podcast. Where's the best place to have our listeners keep up with the Milkmen?
Look for us on YouTube and also our Facebook page. We certainly announce anything that's going on with the band on Facebook. We do have an Instagram site as well, and Twitter, but we don't really get much reaction from Twitter anymore. We have an ancient website, which I update rarely, but who goes to websites anymore?
It's all Facebook or
I really need to get on that and update the band website.
Hey, thanks, Dean. We really appreciate you being with us, and we wish you guys the best of luck with this brand new album, Quaker City Quiet Pills. And hopefully it had been just a short time between albums. Hopefully we see another one in the near future, but we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Once again, we'd like to thank Dean Clean for spending a few moments with us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that interview as much as T-Bone and myself did. And we're going to be back with an episode we haven't done for quite some time, a full review episode.
Absolutely, yeah. And this time we are going to be looking at the latest from Sparks. We've already done one episode from their album before that, but we'll have their newest album this time, and the latest from The Vapors.
And just a reminder, you can always follow us on pretty much any social media platform. Just look up New Wave Music Podcast. Occasionally we'll post on our Facebook, Instagram, show schedules, what's coming up. And if you have a suggestion for the show, we're always open for it. You can either drop us a message through Facebook, Instagram, or the old-fashioned way of email, and that email address is
newwavemusicpodcast@yahoo.com.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you guys on the next episode.